So we are seeing continued growth really in the data center space, especially I'd say with tier 1 and tier 2 hyperscalers. Some of the enterprise companies that have put projects on hold during COVID over last year, 2020, we are starting to see those restarted, some of those projects. Another thing that we're seeing related to that is really extremely long lead times on fiber cable, for example, and that's due to the high demand, combination of the high demand and the supply chain issues. So those things are, again, signs and indications of the market kind of coming back. They really have become very different over the years. They used to be much closer together, but it really, one of the key differences is about the speeds, these Ethernet speeds that they're running and the scale of their network. So those really two things. So, for example, most enterprise companies are running 1 gig, 10 gig down to the servers and probably 10 or 40 gig up, right, uplinks, where the cloud guys are very different, right? Most of them are already 10, 25 down today, 40, 100 gig up and looking to migrate that to, higher speeds of 100 gig, 400 gig, and 800 gig. In terms of scale, the other major factor, right, that for example, large enterprise companies, they're probably in the, maybe in the hundreds, large enterprise, hundreds of server cabinets. Whereas the hyperscale DCs, they're in the thousands or hundreds of thousands. So just that scale is very different. And really the application, so those applications drives different solutions because of that. Good question. I really think there are many demands, many different drivers, I'll say, and use cases. Some of the key ones really, if you look at the key trends and the drivers, so obviously more cloud traffic and more folks moving to the cloud, so that's kind of a gimme. The faster speeds that I was just talking about, and especially moving towards the higher 50 gig lanes, 100 gig lanes, and the server speeds that are coming up. COVID-19 obviously, and the effect of that on working remote and the bandwidth again required for those. 5G is another big driver, big use case, whether it's the telco providers, service providers. So as they build out their networks and support those higher speeds, that's a big one. Many other applications that we're seeing, like online gaming, uncompressed video traffic. These are large files that, each file, an 8K file is very large now. So from media production companies. Telemedicine is another one that we're seeing, and just IoT applications. So really a lot of different applications across different industries. So if I look at and ask about the use cases, but really it's obviously the hyperscale guys, telco, service providers, large enterprise, and media production, media networks, those segments. Really, there used to be a pretty big difference between the two, between single mode and multi-mode, but really we have seen the cost of single mode come down considerably over the last few years, especially. As I was talking about, as the hyperscalers, they're all pretty much using single mode, so they're driving that cost of single mode down, and it's becoming much more on par with multi-mode. So the reality is they're almost the same, and maybe a slight difference on those. So it really makes that decision a little bit tougher now, because the cost is very similar. So you've got obviously a longer reach on single mode, and the cost is about the same. From what I didn't cover on the equipment side, though, just for reference, because you said is the equipment available on the market for 400 gig. So we really started seeing the initial 400 gig switch equipment actually late 2018. So being introduced in the market, and pretty much by mid 2019, most of the major switch manufacturers, Cisco and Arista and Juniper and the likes, did have product on the market, but they're continuing to expand that offering and add new technologies, add new options from a technology standpoint. So there are definitely a lot of applications that are driving more need for reduced latency. A few key things I'll say that have a major impact on that. Obviously, the distance that someone's going to be that is going to be transmitting, right, is going to be the less distance, the better. So one example of that, and that's kind of led to the edge DCs and trying to get closer, right, for those applications to reduce the latency. So that's one of them. Obviously using some of the newer speeds, right, that technologies we talked about, whether it's 25 gig, 50 gig, 100 gig lanes, those are key to reduce that latency. And another one, last one I would say, is really utilizing ultra low loss components in the channel. So that reduces that total channel loss and overall improves the latency of that network. I guess we're seeing a few things. I mean, I'll go back to the hyperscale guys. I mean, those guys are definitely, been rolling out their edge DCs or some call it pop site, kind of the same thing. So Google, Microsoft, and others, I mean, they are deploying small edge DCs to again get closer to their users and to improve latency and improve the service levels. A lot of times those are located in colos as an example, so it's not obviously as large as the traditional DCs. And then the other key ones that we're seeing, obviously the telco service providers, as I talked about, as part of their 5G rollouts, are including the edge in there. On the enterprise side, I think it's pretty light so far. It could be a small 1, 2, 3 cabinet, micro data center, edge DC kind of thing, but not as much probably yet in that space. It's amazing. It's getting pretty complicated. I look back, we're 10 years back in 2010 when 40 and 100 gig first came out with the first IEEE 802.3BA standard. And, it added some complexity to the network designs and the cabling. But, the shift in the last couple of years is much more complicated as really when things started shifting to 100 gig and now they're shifting to 400 gig. So there's a lot of complexity out there. And so I think really it's important to make sure that there's a plan in place for a seamless migration in that network design. And from a Siemon standpoint, we act as a trusted advisor to our customers. Our role is to kind of help educate and understand the technologies and present options. And that's really it. So making sure that the client has all the options and makes an educated decision.